Welcome everyone, benvenuti a tutti, and happy National Italian Heritage Month. I'm so excited to be with you here today to talk about La Storia di Te, your story. Your story matters. Celebrating this month by actually telling your story and giving you my 6 secrets to doing so. Now, if you haven't already printed out your copy of the free 6 Secrets to Telling Your Story guide, please do so because we're going to be using it throughout this event. You can find that either in the email that came to you when you registered for this event, or you can go to madness2magic.com/tellyourstorynow and download it. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that while we kind of get started here. So again, welcome to all. This is 6 simple secrets to telling your story and leaving your legacy for generations to come. Even if you think you can't write, even if you worry that you can't remember, even if you think you don't have the time. And yes, that's me as a child and then me now. And we'll get into who I am right now. So this is my story. I am a writer at my roots. I pretty much have been my entire life. I started out in journalism, working for a daily newspaper, writing feature stories, copywriting. I have been, for the past 3 decades, a creative executive, a communications expert from all aspects, a content producer, an award-winning writer. I am a published author, and I am a writing coach. So these are a few of my projects on the screen. The S Word, that is my first full-length book. It is a memoir. It came out in 2015. And Committed is its sequel. It publishes May 2021. And both of those books have a lot to do with growing up in a Sicilian household. And a few other things are wrapped into those stories. So if you stick with me till the end, you will get a chance to actually get one of those books for free, autographed by me. So I'll explain that in a few minutes. The book that I have that just came out, October 1st, Seriously, Are We There Yet? This is a book that's really kind of Dr. Seuss-y, and it is a kid's book for we grown-ups trying to master this thing called adulting. It's all about not focusing on the coulda, shoulda, wouldas, but actually enjoying the journey, living like a kid again. So that one is for sale now. And then there is Miracle on Mall Drive. That is a fiction novel that comes out in November and has everything to do with Christmas. So that's pretty much me. And here's what I am going to share with you today. First off, how to turn your life stories into a book that will live on forever, even if you've tried before, but you've never finished. Second, how to unearth those memories, even if they are buried deep and you think they may be lost forever. Third, how to actually tell the story you want to tell before someone else tells that story for you. Fourth, how to tell an engaging story without getting overwhelmed. And then we're going to go into the 5th point, how not to spend endless hours struggling to write it right. And yes, actually being excited about writing and telling your story. And then finally, we're going to talk a bit about how to celebrate your life and share the lessons you've learned. And in doing so, feeling that sense of peace and empowerment about your journey, knowing that your story will influence family, friends, and strangers for generations to come. So why is this important? So, ask yourself the question, who will know about the life you've lived and the lessons you've learned if you don't tell anyone about your story? Time passes way too quickly. I think we all know that. And what I want to share here is a story about my own parents. That's them on the screen. So my father, as a young boy in the 1920s, born and raised in Sicily, just as my mother, they did not know one another. But when my father was a little boy, he told me stories of how he would lie on his back and look at the clouds and dream of hopping onto a cloud high in the sky and floating with it across the ocean to America, to the land of the free. That's what he wanted, even as a child. Well, he finally realized his dream and made it to America in around 1952. And the reason he was able to kind of come over, one of the reasons, was he was betrothed, sight unseen, to a mobster's daughter. And upon his arrival in Detroit, Michigan, he was supposed to seal the deal. But during his journey across the ocean from Sicily to the US, while aboard a massive ship, he met a young man named Sam. And Sam happened to show my father a photograph of his sister, who already was in Chicago waiting for him. His sister, who happened to be my mom, she was very young, very single, very beautiful, and in the photo, dressed as a mandolin player for Carnevale. You can see her here. And my father happened to be a mandolin player. He loved playing the mandolin. So when he saw my mom in that photo, or the young woman, I should say, she wasn't my mom yet, in that photo, my dad never made it to Detroit. Instead, he put down roots in Chicago and married the girl in the picture, my mother. Now, as you can imagine, there's a lot more to that story. And there's a lot more to my father's story. And there's a lot more to my mother's story. The truth is, everyone has a story to tell. I'm sure if I asked everyone who's listening to this or watching this, every one of you has lived quite a life and has an incredible story. But who knows your story? Where is it kept? Will it live on long after you do? Now, I know my parents' stories because I wrote them. I'm fortunate being a writer, and it was easy for me to sit down, take pen to paper, and jot their stories down so that they are still alive with me, even though physically they are not here. So tonight, I'm going to share with you why you should consider, if you haven't already, writing your story or having your story written. And I'm going to offer some tips in getting you started in doing so. So before we continue, I want to make sure I am not promising you certain things today. So for example, I'm not promising that you're going to learn to write a bestseller in a weekend. I'm not promising that your results will come without any work to get them. And I'm not promising that this isn't a process. I mean, if you really think about it, how long did it take us to learn how to twirl our pasta? Maybe for some, it came pretty easily. For me, it did not. But I have mastered it, twirling my pasta bolognese onto my fork, into my mouth, without getting it on my shirt. It was a process, but it was so, so worth it. And this will be worth it to you. Now, I told you that at the end, I will have a free gift for you. So please do stay with me through the end. I promise you will enjoy what I have to offer. Who is this workshop for? This workshop is for you if you do have a story to tell and you aren't sure how to do it or even how to get started. This is for you if you're wondering if your story is even worth telling. This is for you if maybe you've been keeping some family secrets locked inside. And now you're kind of ready to confront them, but maybe you need someone who's been there before to kind of help you through it. This workshop is for you if you are proud of your Italian heritage, or really any heritage. This goes for anyone really, but you want to tell your story and you want to tell it the way you want it told. And this is for you if you or your parents or grandparents are getting on in years and you want your family and the generations to come to know all about their roots. So the truth is, there is no mystery here. There is no magic really here. The real challenge is you just haven't been shown what I'm about to show you today. And, you know, I love this little kind of stone inscribed when we went to Tuscany. This was just kind of in the pathway on the walls. And this one happened to say, non tutto quello che affrontiamo può essere cambiato, ma tutto quello che vogliamo cambiare deve essere affrontato. What does that mean? Not everything we confront can be changed, but everything we want to change must be confronted. So for you, if you want to change, having spent years and years wanting to write down your story, wanting to write a book, but you haven't, this is how we're going to do it. You're going to confront what's actually been stopping you, what's actually been getting you stuck, and finally moving forward if you really want to. Once you implement what I show you today, you will know how to turn your life stories into a book that will live on forever. You will unearth those memories and learn to celebrate your past, knowing that whatever came before, it's what made you, you. You will tell the story you want to tell before someone else tells the story for you. And you will know how not to get overwhelmed when writing that story of you. You'll also learn how not to spend endless hours struggling to write it right. And yes, you will enjoy this process. You will be finally on the path to leaving a legacy that matters for your family, friends, and strangers for generations to come. Now, again, I do have an unfair advantage. As I said, 3 decades as a communications expert with roots in journalism. I have won awards for my writing. I am a published author, a content strategist, producer, empowerment and writing coach. These are some of my books. On top of that, I have had 10 plus years of real therapy to write the first book, and a lifetime of journaling, which I also consider writing therapy. And those are some of the places where my pieces have been published, Forbes, The Muse, etc. So I do have an unfair advantage. That said, you can learn from the years that it's taken me to learn what I know now. And that's part of why I am presenting to you today, because I think your story is important. And I think there are so many ways to really do what it is that you want to do with expertise from someone who's been there before and has figured out how to do it in a much easier and shorter time frame. So let me tell you another story. This is my mother again. And this story is about my mom, me, and my now husband, Joe, and his Harley, his Road King. So when I moved away from Chicago to Los Angeles, I flew my mother out to visit me. My father had already passed away. She had never been out here. I don't even believe she had met my then boyfriend, who's now my husband. So I had always been close to my dad, but not so much to my mom. And my mother and I, she was ill for a very long time. We became close later on in her later years, but not early on. So a lot of her stories, I did not know as many as I knew from my father. When my mother arrived at the airport, my boyfriend, now my husband, drove me to go pick her up at LAX. She had never, really been anywhere other than Italy, obviously, and then Chicago, or places that you could kind of drive to. We didn't do a lot of traveling as a family when we were little. So this was kind of a new experience for her. I expected her to, say something about her trip, but she was always very, very quiet. And despite what she may have been thinking, she really was silent in the car ride from LAX to my home, which is kind of amusing since it's almost a couple of hours to get from there to here, at least an hour with no traffic. So when we finally arrived to the house, Joe, my husband, grabs the bags. I help my mother from the driveway to the front door. Parked just outside my front door was my husband's Harley Road King. And it's a pretty impressive motorcycle. It's got all the bells and whistles. The minute my mother saw it, her eyes lit up. And all of a sudden, she had a lot to say, starting with, "Che bella motocicletta, di chi è?" She wanted to know who this beautiful bike belonged to. And I told her it was Joe's. And she didn't stop there. She just couldn't stop looking at it. And even when we came inside, and we started to, eat something, she kept looking out the window at the motorcycle and she kept asking tons of questions. And finally I said, Ma, what's with the bike? I don't get it. Why are you fascinated with the bike? And she said that when she was around 16 years old in Nicosia, Sicily, where she and her family lived in around 1943, she had been working as an apprentice for a local seamstress. And after a full day's work, she'd have to walk home this very long distance in high heel shoes on cobblestones. And one night she was walking home. She was so tired. Her feet were killing her. Just then, she told me, a very cute young boy on a motorcycle rode up beside her and offered her a ride. Now, she knew that her father, my grandfather, who was very strict, if he found out, he would punish her pretty severely. So, she was really risking quite a bit. But she said to me at that moment, Paula, I didn't care about any consequences. Her entire face was just beaming with, and her eyes, like you could see, she was like reliving the moment as she was telling me. She told me of how she hopped onto the back of that boy's motorcycle, hung onto his waist, and together they sped down the streets in view of everybody. And she loved every minute of it. She said that was possibly her one favorite memory of when she was young. And I asked her, if you had gotten caught, then what? Like, would you have regretted doing it? And she said, not at all. She said it would have been totally worth it. And she would have done it again. Now, I tell you this story for two reasons. One, I never would have known this about my 16-year-old mama, her love of motorcycles, her youthful free spirit, and the dare on the back of that bike. I never would have known this excitement, this different mama. I just wouldn't. And if I had not, asked about it, and if I had not written it down, right? So that's the first thing I want you to get from this story. The second is that Mama may have never even told me this story if her memory had not been triggered by seeing that Harley, seeing that motorcycle. She completely came alive. And had she not, that beautiful story and glimpse into who she was as a teenager would have died with her. How sad would that have been? And I am so grateful it did not. Mama's story is just one of many now that I have. And it's why I focus everything I have learned in my life about storytelling, writing, publishing, marketing stories into helping others make sure their stories don't stay locked up inside of them, and that they and their loved ones know about their lives and their lessons long after they're gone. So this is the process I'm going to show you today. So I do hope that you have printed out your guide because we're going to get started. Are you ready to tell your story? This lovely lady was definitely ready. This client of mine did not have an easy life, and for a lot of it, she blamed herself about some of her choices. She and her husband were worried about resurrecting old ghosts, reliving parts of her past. She loved to read, though, and she fantasized about reimagining herself as a heroine in the Old West. Her husband loved the idea too. This is one of her favorite books. And she and her husband are working on telling their story, but instead of focusing on it with shame or regret, they're coming to it with the perspective of everything they overcame in their lives and viewing themselves as the badasses that they really were and still are. So she was ready, despite having some regrets about some of her past choices, despite the fear of resurrecting old ghosts, and despite the worries of reliving parts of her past. This guy, now, despite his picture, which we captured during one of our interviews, he's a great guy, very, very passionate. He was ready. You'd never know to look at him from the outside, but this successful corporate leader struggled with his past, one that filled him with shame. No matter how many accolades and awards he had earned throughout his career, he didn't have a lot of time to dig to dig into his past and worried about exposing secrets he had kept for so long that might harm his career and position. But for as accomplished as this client had become, something inside him needed to put his past onto the page, not just for his own sense of peace, but to give his life and all he endured a greater purpose. So he was ready, despite having very little time, despite having kept secrets his whole life, and despite having worries of what others may think or say. So again, are you ready? Because here is secret number one. This secret has to do with how to turn your stories into an actual book. And for that, this is your clue on what that worksheet with all the blanks, what we're going to be filling those blanks in with. So this is birth, life, and death. Now, regardless of what your mom might have told you about how long it took to birth you, when we compare our birth and our inevitable death in terms of time to the whole of our lives, it's pretty clear that in comparison, both birth and death are pretty swift. Whereas our actual lives, the searching, the loving, the working, the playing, the losing, the winning, the fighting, the climbing, the failing, all of the beautiful messiness of life, the actual living, good, bad, or ugly, it's pretty long in comparison to birth and death. A lot happens in the middle. So when you even think about it in your childhood, maybe you moved to a new home when you were a kid. Maybe you got a baby brother. Maybe your grandma or grandpa died. Maybe you were bullied in school. A lot happens when you're a kid. Then put on top of it everything that happens when you're an adult. You've got school, graduation, your job, you get married, you've got kids, so many things regarding adulting. There's a lot, and that's an understatement when it comes to living. And so while all of that is important, not all of that becomes the stuff of stories. Life is not measured by the breaths you take, but by the moments that take your breath away. So the point is this: your entire life is super important, yes, but the stuff that makes a story is the stuff that takes your breath away, right? It's not the years, it's not everything that happened to you. It's those moments that stand out and were pivotal. I actually learned this from a writing mentor of mine. Your story is the story from your life, not the story of your life. And when you think of it this way, it gives you the power to focus on that defined period that's actually doable, something that you can finally write and get onto the page. Too often, we think about telling our whole story. We make the mistake of thinking that our story has to include everything, and that overwhelms us and stops us from moving forward. So secret number one is this: realizing that your story is all about telling a story from your life, not of your life. That is the first secret. And if you don't believe me, let me just give you a few examples. So this book, Wild, by Cheryl Strayed, also made into a movie. Cheryl Strayed was 26, and she took 94 days to hike along the Pacific Crest Trail. Now, at 26, she had lived life prior to that, right? 25 years at least. And that's not how the book was framed. That's not the from a life that she chose to focus on. So yes, she wove in parts of her life that were prior, right? Her mom dying, etc. But the story, the frame of that story, the from of life is the 94 days that she spent on that hike. It gives it a beginning, middle, and an end, right? Under the Tuscan Sun, again, this story is about a woman. She learns her husband is cheating on her. So to get out of being depressed, she decides to take a trip to Italy. And during that trip, this new divorcee all of a sudden just buys a Tuscan villa, and then she struggles to renovate it and herself. That is the little slice of life from her life. Cinema Paradiso. We've got a little boy, and he escapes life from his war-torn Sicilian village by going to this movie house, and he befriends the projectionist, and he just starts to fall in love with movies. Well, when he grows up and takes over, he falls in love with a beautiful local girl. The question is, does he pursue his passion for filmmaking, or does he stay there? It is a story from a life. And again, some of these are fiction, but we're going to talk about that too, because Wild is not fiction. It's an actual memoir. So whatever it is that you are writing, it is a slice of life. It is from life, not of a life, right? I hope this is making sense to you all. This is our first secret and your first simple get started step. So for your worksheets, you're going to fill in what I now know is that the way to turn my stories into a book that I finish is to realize it's the story from a life, not the story of a life. And your simple get started step, I want you to just hop off of this call when we're done, and you start jotting down those moments of your life that took your breath away, right? That's what's going to actually influence what you choose to write. Secret number 2. This has to do with unearthing those valuable memories. Now, who among us hasn't felt like this, right? I have an incredible memory as long as I remember to use it. Every one of us, our memories fail us from time to time, right? And now we're expecting it to do double time to capture a story. The challenge is digging up those memories that may be kind of buried deep. So how do we do that? To give you a little hint, here's another visual from my life. The key is use the tools that you actually have. And what do I mean by that? So all of these, I can tell you exactly where I was, who I was with, when it was, why I was there, how I was feeling. The first time I saw the movie, It's a Wonderful Life, my favorite movie, I watched it on TV. I was around 11 years old. It was Christmas time, and my dad and I stumbled onto the story of George Bailey. At the time, it had never before been broadcast, certainly not how it is now. Every time I see that movie today, I am taken right back to sitting on the couch, cradled in the crook of my dad's arm around me, watching it together, right? I can feel being there. Another memory for me, looking through my junk drawer of pictures, I came upon this old snapshot. You remember those before digital? So this is of my little sister and myself. We are posing for the camera on New Year's Day. The whole family is over. And honestly, I remember how silly I thought the grown-ups were, because what you don't see in this picture is what I do and what I remember seeing every time I look at it. Every adult was wearing one of those same little silly hats that are on our head. And they looked funny. And so it still makes me laugh, but I can remember just from this little trigger. What about music? Well, if I were to start singing, which I know I'm not the best singer, but well, you can tell by the way I use my walk. Everybody knows what that is, right? Everybody probably could finish those lyrics. Yeah. So look, songs, images, smells, tastes, just like my mom and that Harley. What are the tools that you already have that you can use to dig up your memories? And that is secret 2. Unearthing valuable memories is easy when you use the tools you have and explore the junk drawer. That's what I want you to write down on your worksheets. And one simple get started step for you. Take a look at the years of your life. take a look, break them up into 5-year increments, 10-year increments, heck, even 1-year increments, and do a Google search. Take a look at what the most popular music was during that particular year. When you start to listen to those songs from yesteryear, I promise you they will so bring back a ton of memories that will make you smile. They'll take your breath away. Maybe they'll get you a little more emotional, but they will definitely help you in writing your stories and really positioning yourself back then with your 5 senses so that you can accurately write those stories. So now secret 3. A lot of blanks in this one. Blank is the story of blank, while I know the real truth is blank. So to help with what we're talking about here, I have a question for you. This image, what do you actually see here? What do you see? Do you see that elephant's trunk? Or maybe you see those grass huts? Maybe you see those birds. The question is, what do you see? So this optical illusion, it's the same for all of us. Absolutely the same for all of us. But each one of us may have seen something other than what someone else has. And so when writing the story of your life, don't let somebody else hold the pen. And what do we mean by that? Your journey, your story, your life, it's yours, your unique journey. Now, other people may have shared some of those same experiences with you, but how they perceived those moments, what they assume because of what they themselves have brought to the table during those moments, that's their story. It's not your story. So, I laugh because I have a podcast, Madness to Magic, I'm with Crazy, a love story. And my brother came to visit me and I interviewed him for one of the episodes of the podcast. And we started talking about our childhood. And I was surprised because some of the very same experiences that we had, he had a bit of a different take, in part because he was older, in part because he wasn't around, and in part because he was a boy in a Sicilian household. So it just, a lot of who he was and what he brought to the table, it gave him a different perspective of the very same things, just like this optical illusion. And so again, this has everything to do with telling your story, not someone else's. So secret number 3, what others think is the story of what they see, while I know the real truth is mine and mine alone to tell, right? So whatever other people see, interpret, perceive, that's theirs. The real truth is yours and what you experienced and believe. So the simple get started step is tell your truth. Turn off that inner critic. Don't worry about someone else's version of the story. Let them write theirs. You write yours. Secret number 4. Telling my story without blank and still making sure it's blank is possible when I blank. Now for this secret, here's your clue. So how crazy is this picture? I absolutely love this picture. Take a look at how these kids are flying. Look at their little faces. There's a little bit of terror, a little bit of glee, a little bit of, oh, hang on. Now tell me, what do you see here? What could this possibly have to do with secret number 4 and you telling your story? Do you think these kids really had any idea what they really were getting into when they hopped onto this little cart and started downhill? I seriously doubt it. And it makes me laugh just thinking about it. I'm sure they didn't think about it at all. They were just in the moment, right? Now, at the bottom of the hill, did they crash? Maybe. Did they get banged up? Did they cry? Did they get scolded? Maybe. Maybe all of the above. Maybe none of the above. But as children, who now, let's say that they are adults and they're looking back. What do you think they'll remember and talk about? I bet this is top of the list, right? So the question is, there's a lot of things in our past that we may have done or said, and hindsight is 2020. That was then, this is now. Maybe today, with what we know now, maybe we would have made different choices. Maybe we would have made the same choices. We don't know, and we don't have to know. One of my favorite poets, the late Maya Angelou, once said, "I did then what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better." You did then what you knew how to do. Now you're writing stories about it with a newfound perspective, wisdom. You've aged, you've experienced more. Today, you know better and you do better, but not yesterday. So acknowledge that. Be at peace with that, because being so critical about whatever happened in the past, right? It's not warranted. You don't deserve it, because you did what was best in that moment, right? And being critical, that is going to stop you from actually being able to tell your story. So, secret number 4, telling my story without being overwhelmed and still making sure it's engaging is possible when you let go and stop judging. Take yourself back to the moment you experienced whatever it is you're writing about. Let your reader feel everything you felt when you were in that moment, and do not judge it from where you sit now. Be like those kids that we saw. Let go. I promise you, this secret makes all the difference in the world for your stories being authentic, inspiring, engaging, and fun for you to tell. So your one simple get started step: pretend you're not you. Instead, while you write, think of yourself as your story's main character, right? You are the you of the past. So you're not the you of today. So think of what you experienced, all those feelings, as separate from you. You're the main character of your story. I promise it will make your writing much more engaging and easier for you. Secret number 5. Trying to be blank is the quickest way to blank. So the key to spending less time and enjoying writing is blank. And here is your clue. Now, this is pretty easy. What is this here on the screen? Well, we all definitely know it's the Nike swoosh, right? Now, what's this? Still pretty easy, but it is the swoosh, but this is a copy of the original swoosh sketch that Carolyn Davis, the Portland State College student, submitted in 1971 to her professor, Phil Knight. Phil Knight was the guy who was toying with the idea of starting a little shoe company. Now, if you haven't heard this story before, Carolyn agreed to be paid $2 per hour. And at the end of the day, her invoice for 17.5 hours earned her a check for $35 for creating the Nike swoosh. That's kind of crazy, isn't it? Having done marketing work with brands and logos, 17 hours isn't a lot of time. And I know we all would agree, $35 for what this is not a lot of money, right? But that's not my favorite part of the story. And it's not what we're talking about here about telling your story. This is the favorite part of the story. When Phil Knight got the logo from her, he said, well, I don't love it, but maybe it'll grow on me. Now, can you imagine that? Now, don't worry. I understand that Nike gave Carolyn shares of stock and a lot more. I think she was ultimately given like $1 million or something. But what does this little story have to do with you and yours? Secret number 5. Trying to be perfect is the quickest way to giving up. So the key to spending less time and enjoying writing is to be like Nike, right? So look, Phil Knight, it was a doodle, and he looked at it and he said, oh, you know what, it's okay. He didn't stop everything and say, no, it's not perfect. He took what it was and moved forward with it, right? So that is exactly what I recommend for everyone in writing their stories. Stop expecting to be perfect, not on the first draft. One of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott, every single first draft that she writes, she titles it my, excuse the term, but SHIT, my shitty first draft. And that is how I want you all to think about yours, because that perfection is the thief of progress. So one simple get started step, you lower the bar, ditch your expectations. Your first and only job is getting your story out. I like to say, just vomit it out, get it out onto the page, whatever it is you're thinking. Do not critique yourself, not at this stage. So secret number 6, blank my life and blank the blank mean everything to me and my blank. Blank and blank are the way to blank. Those are a lot of blanks for, for one little secret, but let me share what I mean by it. So again, this is another photograph of my mom when she was a little girl in Sicily. She's the one there to the left with the yellow arrow. I told you she was sewing circles, and I believe I told you that she was in sewing circles in her little town. Those are silkworms, actually, in those baskets. But my mom never really thought much of her story. She never thought the story of her life was all that special, and she never gave it much thought. And I told you that in truth, at the start, neither did I. Does that sound familiar for any of you, thinking, hey, is my story even important? So I'm going to tell you another story about my mom. One terrible stormy night, in my attempt to help calm my mom's fear of thunder, I sat her down and asked her to share her memories while I took notes. And I thought it was a pretty innocent question, right? The power had gone out. I lit candles. I was just trying to kind of soothe her. So I just asked her, Mom, when you were, a child, what was your favorite childhood toy or playtime activity? Now, this was before the motorcycle story. We were still in Chicago. I was living with her. My father had passed away, but I had not come out to LA yet. So I asked her what her favorite childhood toy or playtime activity was. My mom just kind of looked at me. Her eyes kind of started to water as she remembered. And she said, I had no happy childhood memories. And I was a bit shocked. And I was like, what do you mean you had none? And she told me how poor they had grown up. Her mom had died when she was very young. Her 3 brothers and father were taken prisoners in Africa during World War II. One brother and her father never made it home. She told me of how when she was young, they hid when the bombs were exploding all around them during the war. And then she told me that just a couple of weeks before her 16th birthday, the Americans landed on Sicily, and that on the actual eve of her 16th birthday, Mussolini was arrested. Those were my mother's memories. And yet, my mom went through all of that, and then she was commissioned by the famous designer Emilio Pucci to come to America to work as a seamstress for him. And then while here, she meets my dad, and then goes on to have a family, goes on to start her own business, learns English, and yet she didn't think her life was all that special. My mom's life mattered, and so does yours. I told you this story for 2 reasons. My mom never thought her life was all that special, but I did, right? And her life was very, very special. And 2, we may never have known about my mom's life if it hadn't been for the thunderstorm, for me sitting down, asking her to tell it, writing it down so that she lives on long after she was gone. My mother and the life she lived and the lessons she had learned mattered, And I am so grateful that I know them. Your story matters. But again, who knows your story? Who knows the stories of your parents, your grandparents? And what's stopping you from telling those stories? I know my parents' stories because I wrote them. I know stories of others. I have ghostwritten stories of multimillionaires. I have co-authored stories. Everyone has a story, and yours matters, and it's up to you to tell it. And you can use a lot of these secrets to get started. It's up to you to get more help to tell your stories, but don't let your stories kind of die with you. You're here because you do have a story to tell. You're here because you want to learn how to tell it. I have so many friends, colleagues, clients, and too often their life journeys have died with them, their parents, their grandparents. Those lessons have gone unsaid and unshared. That revelation makes me super sad because I know what it's meant to me to not only know the stories of my own family, but also to have learned about incredible stories from the people that I've helped to write their stories. So that's why I'm here with this workshop. So secret number 6, you do get credit for living in my book, because living is not easy, right? And we're not just giving up, we're actually learning lessons. We're actually going through things that really you deserve credit for your life, and other people will benefit from knowing about it. So secret number 6, celebrating my life and sharing the lessons learned mean everything to me and my legacy. Prioritizing and a plan are the way to succeed. Your life is something to be celebrated. No matter what you went through, no matter the choices you made, it's filled with great moments and lessons that are meant to be passed on generation to generation. Maybe you haven't been able to tell your story before, but I want you, for this simple get started step, I want you to put yourself first. Make telling your story a priority. Never doubt that your life matters, not just to you, but to those who will be here long after you're gone. So those are the 6 secrets to telling your story. And if we were in person, we would raise a glass right now. So I told you I was going to share with you how to turn your life stories into a book that will live on forever, even if you tried before but never finished. I told you how to unearth valuable memories you may have buried deep down, even if you think they've been lost forever. I told you I was going to share with you how to tell the story you want to tell before someone else tells it for you. I told you how to tell an engaging story without getting overwhelmed. And I told you how not to spend endless hours struggling to write it right. And yes, how to feel excited about it. And finally, I told you I was going to share how to celebrate your story and share those lessons you've learned. And yeah, feel that sense of peace and empowerment about your journey, knowing that your story will influence family, friends, and strangers for generations to come. So just a quick recap. We went through how to turn your life stories into a book that will live on forever. And that is secret number 1, because your story is a story from your life, not of your life. Secret number 2, we talked about how to unearth those buried memories. How do you do it? You use your tools and explore the junk drawer. Secret number 3, we talked about how to tell the story you want to tell, not someone else's. And that secret is tell your truth. Stop editing yourself. Stop telling someone else's story. Let them tell their own. Secret number 4, I told you I would share how to tell an engaging story without getting overwhelmed. Well, remember those kids flying on that little cart downhill? You're going to just let go and stop judging your past, right? Approach your story from when it happened and what you knew back then. Secret number 5, how not to spend endless hours struggling to get it right. You're going to think of that Nike logo. And you're going to be like Nike. You're just going to do it. You're going to not have expectations. You're not going to actually try to be perfect, right? Because that robs progress. And finally, number 6, how to celebrate your life and share those lessons learned. You're just going to know that your story matters. And you are going to actually have a sense of peace and empowerment as you write this, because it is going to matter, not only to you, but your family, friends, strangers, generations to come. So I told you that if you stayed throughout this entire call, I was going to give you a gift. And so, yes, you now know the six secrets and you can totally get started, but I have something special for you, because sometimes you have questions that are specific to you and your story. So I want to offer you each a free one-on-one call with me so we can talk about your story, what may still have you stuck, what's holding you back, and really how to get the best from you, how to get it out of your head and your heart and onto the page. So book a free call at madnesstomagic.com/my-story. What's going to happen on that call? So during that call, you are going to get clarity on the story you want to write. We're going to talk about different options and a plan that's right for you to get your story told. And I promise when we're done with that call, you're actually going to feel like you can write your story. This one call could be the beginning of getting what you want, your story told the way you want to tell it. So book your free call. And what else is going to happen on that call? You're going to be set up for success. That's super important to me. No matter what stopped you before, you are going to be talking to a confidant in me, someone who's actually been there before and been able to not only get her own stories on the page and published, but also the stories of others. Whatever you tell me stays between us. And look, during that call, if you kind of decide that there's value to us working together, that's great. We can talk about all the different options for that to happen. If you decide that you don't want to work together, that's totally fine too. I want to make sure that you are set up for success and that you don't go another year, 5 years, 10 years, or never getting that story out of you and onto the page. You have everything to gain and nothing to lose by chatting with me. Now, that said, this call isn't for everyone, but it is for you. If you've held that story in your heart for way too long and you really want to start putting it on the page. This call isn't for everyone, but it is for you if you're not okay waiting another year or 2 or 10 to write your book and leave that legacy. And this call is not for everyone, but it is for you if you do realize that this is going to take commitment on your part, right? It is going to take some time. It's going to take an investment of resources and priority you. It's going to take you making you a priority. That's the number one thing. So this one call could finally get you on the path to really telling your story. And that's what I want for you. Again, why am I doing this? Time passes way too quickly. And who will know about the life you've lived and the lessons you've learned if you don't tell your story? So I hope you actually take advantage of this free call, no obligation, and talk with me about how you can actually start to do that. Look, my first book, The S Word, it took me 10 years to finally write it. And, I'm a writer, so I have learned a ton about the shortcuts. My next 3 books, they took at most 2 years, but even like 8 months just to kind of get it down. A much shorter cycle, and those are stories that really needed to be told as well. So I am doing this because I don't want anyone else to experience what my friends and other colleagues have, not knowing what their parents, their grandparents' stories are, or having a story in them and just saying, hey, one day I'm going to write a book, but they just never get around to it. that's really sad. So again, knowing, because now you know the 6 steps, knowing is not enough. You must apply. So you've got to apply what you learned here, and you can do it on your own. If you choose to grab one of the few spots and have that private chat with me, then the first 5 to book a call will get a free autographed book sent to them. Again, no obligation during the call, but sign up on madness2magic.com/my-story. So now I do take questions, and we did when this presentation was live. If you do have a question, or you want to sign up for the free call, go to madness2magic.com/my-story, and I'm going to ask you a few questions about your own stories, and that'll get us started. If you have some question for me, you are very welcome to go ahead and send it to powerlina@madness2magic.com. So that's powerlina@madness2magic.com, or sign up for the chat and we can have a really nice talk about you, about your story, about what's gotten you stuck, and how to get you moving forward to getting what's in your head and heart out and onto the page. With that, I am going to thank you for watching this presentation, and I wish you great success in telling your stories, and cannot wait to actually learn more about you and what you want to leave as your legacy. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good day.